In September 1982, a strange occurrence took place in and around Chicago, Illinois. It all began when 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up with a sore throat and runny nose. Her parents gave her one extra-strength Tylenol and sent her back to bed. At 7 o'clock that morning, she was discovered dead. That same day, September 29th, 27-year-old Adam Janis also died shortly after taking an extra-strength Tylenol. His brother and sister-in-law, who met other family at Janis's house that day to console one another, both took some extra-strength Tylenol for the grief-induced headaches they were experiencing. Janis's brother Stanley died that same day, and his sister-in-law, Teresa, died a couple of days later. Panic took over the city and the nation. 3 more victims died shortly after consuming Tylenol. Mary McFarland, 35, Paula Prince, 35, and Mary Weiner, 27. All of them, it turned out, took Tylenol shortly before they died. At last, in early October, investigators drew the connection between the mysterious deaths and Tylenol. Each victim had unknowingly swallowed a capsule that had been laced with cyanide. The poisoning occurred after the bottles had already left the factory. Someone, it appeared, poisoned the capsules and then placed the tampered Tylenol bottles back on the shelf. Although investigators figured out how the Chicago victims died, they never captured the perpetrator. One man named James Lewis wrote a letter to Johnson & Johnson, who manufactured Tylenol, claiming to be the killer. He said he would stop the killings if he was paid $1 million. Police quickly ruled out Lewis as the actual suspect, but he was found guilty of extortion. No other leads or suspects were ever identified. Here on Volcanic Minds TV, we'll do a short deep dive on the murders, the investigation that taken place regarding the murders, and the aftermath. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. The Chicago Tylenol murders were a series of poisoning deaths resulting from drug tampering in the Chicago metropolitan area in 1982. The victims consumed Tylenol-branded acetaminophen, paracetamol, capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. At least 7 people died in the original poisonings, and there were several more deaths in subsequent copycat crimes. No suspect has been charged or convicted of the poisonings as of 2025, but New York City resident James W. Lewis was convicted of extortion for sending a letter to Tylenol's manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson, that took responsibility for the deaths and demanded $1 million to stop them. The incidents led to reforms in the packaging of over-the-counter drugs and to federal anti-tampering laws. Deaths and early public safety efforts. On September 28, 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was hospitalized after consuming a capsule of extra-strength Tylenol. She died the next day. On September 29th, 6 other individuals consumed contaminated Tylenol. 1, including Adam Janis, 27, Stanley Janis, 25, and Teresa Janis, 19, who each took Tylenol from a single bottle. All 6, the Janises Mary McFarland, 31, Paula Prince, 35, and Mary Reiner, 27, would ultimately die from consuming the pills. Asked to investigate the Janises' deaths, Nurse Helen Jensen, Arlington Heights' only public health official, visited the Janis household and discovered a Tylenol bottle with an accompanying receipt indicating it had been purchased the same day. Noticing that there were 6 pills missing, she turned the bottle over to investigator Nick Pichos and reported her suspicion that it was related to the Janises' deaths. Pichos called Edmund R. Donahue, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for Cook County, who, suspecting that cyanide may be the culprit, asked Pichos to smell the bottle. When Pichos smelled an almond-like scent, Donahue asked the county's chief toxicologist, Michael Schaefer, to test the capsules, and Schaefer's team determined that 4 of the 44 remaining capsules from the Janis bottle contained nearly 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide. Authorities held a press conference advising the public not to take Tylenol for the time being. By chance, the bottle of Tylenol that Kellerman used was inventoried by paramedics. Investigators noticed that the Janis bottle and the Kellerman bottle came from the same lot, MC 2880, and Johnson & Johnson issued a recall for all Tylenol from that lot. But when tainted bottles from other lots were discovered, for example, the pills in Mary McFarland's possession were traced to lots 1910 MD and MB 2738. The recall expanded to cover those lots and any bottle of extra-strength capsules from any lot purchased in the Chicago area, making it one of the largest pharmaceutical recalls ever. A multi-agency investigation found the tampered pills to have been sold or on the shelves at a variety of stores in the Chicago area, including 2 different Jewel Foods locations, one in Arlington Heights, one in Elk Grove Village, an Osco drugstore in Schaumburg, a Walgreens and a Dominick's, both in Chicago, and a Frank's Finer Foods in Winfield. One bottle had been purchased, but due to an off scent, not yet used by Linda Morgan, wife of Judge Lewis V. Morgan. In an effort to reassure the public, Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol, distributed warnings to hospitals and distributors and halted Tylenol production and advertising. After other incidents, like strychnine added to Tylenol bottles in California, a nationwide recall of Tylenol products was issued on October 5, 1982. An estimated 31 million bottles were in circulation, with a retail value of over $100 million equivalent to $326 million in 2024. The company also advertised in the national media for individuals not to consume any of its products that contained acetaminophen after it was determined that only these capsules had been tampered with. Johnson & Johnson also offered to exchange all Tylenol capsules already purchased by the public for solid tablets. Customs at airports outside the U.S. asked visitors if they brought Tylenol medicine with them. Police investigation, the tainted capsules were found to have been manufactured at 2 different locations, Pennsylvania and Texas, suggesting that the capsules were tampered with after the product had been placed on store shelves for sale. The police hypothesis was that someone had taken bottles off shelves in local stores of the Chicago area, placed potassium cyanide in some of the capsules, and then placed the packages back on the store shelves to be purchased by unknowing customers. In addition to the 5 bottles that led to the victims' deaths, a few other contaminated bottles were later discovered in the Chicago area. In early 1983, at the FBI's request, Chicago Tribune columnist Bob Greene published the address and grave location of the first and youngest victim, Mary Kellerman. The story, written with the Kellerman family's consent, was proposed by FBI criminal analyst John Douglas on the theory that the perpetrators might visit the house or gravesite if they were made aware of their locations. Both sites were kept under 24-hour video surveillance for several months, but the killer did not surface. 16. A surveillance photo of Paula Prince purchasing cyanide-tampered Tylenol at a Walgreens at 1601 North Wells Street in Chicago was released by the Chicago Police Department. Police believe that a bearded man seen just feet behind Prince may be the killer. Suspects during the initial investigation, a man named James William Lewis was accused of sending a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the cyanide-induced murders. Upon his arrest, Lewis told authorities how the person behind the attacks may have carried out the killings by buying Tylenol, adding cyanide to the bottles, and returning them to the store shelves. Lewis was also found to have previously possessed a poisoning book and, according to a confidential law enforcement document, his fingerprints were discovered on pages related to cyanide. Lewis denied being responsible for the poisonings, but he admitted to writing the letter, which he said he had worked on for 3 days. During the trial, his attorneys claimed that Lewis intended only to focus the attention of the authorities on his wife's former employer. Lewis was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In 2007, authorities determined that the letter had an October 1, 1982, postmark, meaning that if Lewis's 3-day timeline was accurate, he would have begun working on the letter prior to the first news reports concerning the poisonings. When confronted with this information, Lewis recanted his timeline. Court documents released in early 2009 show Department of Justice investigators concluded Lewis was responsible for the poisonings, despite the fact that they did not have enough evidence to charge him. 24. In January 2010, both Lewis and his wife submitted DNA samples and fingerprints to authorities. 25. Lewis said, "If the FBI plays it fair, I have nothing to worry about." The DNA samples did not match any DNA recovered on the bottles. Lewis continued to deny responsibility for the poisonings. Lewis died on July 9, 2023, at age 76. Police also investigated a second man, Roger Arnold, a dock worker at a Jewel-Osco in Melrose Park, who told officers that he possessed potassium cyanide. Bar owner Marty Sinclair, whose establishment Arnold frequented, reported Arnold to the police, saying that Arnold had discussed killing people with a white powder and had become increasingly erratic after his marriage had dissolved. Arnold had worked with victim Mary Reiner's father at a warehouse, and Arnold's wife had been treated at a hospital across the street from the store in which Reiner bought her cyanide-laced pills. A copy of the poor man's James Bond, which contained instructions on making potassium cyanide, was found in Arnold's home. Arnold was held several times by the police, but never charged. In the summer of 1983, Arnold, mistaking John Stanisha, a random passerby, for Sinclair, shot and killed Stanisha, a computer consultant and father of three, who was leaving a bar with multiple friends. Arnold was convicted of the killing in January 1984 and served 15 years of his 30-year sentence for murder, saying in 1996 from prison, "I killed a man, a perfectly innocent person. I had choices. I could have walked away." He died in June 2008. In 2010, Arnold's body was exhumed and subsequently reburied so that his femur could be removed for DNA testing. 32 Arnold's DNA did not match the DNA samples discovered on the bottles. 21st century investigation efforts in early January 2009. Illinois authorities renewed the investigation. Federal agents searched the home of Lewis in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and seized a number of items. In Chicago, an FBI spokesman declined to comment, but said, "We'll have something to release later possibly." In 2010, DNA samples were collected from Lewis and Arnold, whose bodies were exhumed for that purpose. Neither's DNA matched DNA samples found on the tainted bottles. Law enforcement officials received a number of tips related to the case, coinciding with its 25th anniversary. In a written statement, the FBI explained this review was prompted in part by the recent 25th anniversary of this crime and the resulting publicity. Pharmaceutical changes. The 1982 incident inspired the pharmaceutical, food, and consumer product industries to develop tamper-resistant packaging, such as induction seals, and improve quality control methods. Moreover, product tampering was made a federal crime. The incident prompted the pharmaceutical industry to move away from capsules, which were easy to contaminate as a foreign substance, could be placed inside without obvious signs of tampering. Within the year, the FDA introduced more stringent regulations to avoid product tampering. This led to the eventual replacement of the capsule with a solid caplet, a tablet made in the shape of the capsule, as a drug delivery form, and with the addition of tamper-evident safety seals to bottles of many sorts. Once again, if you made it this far, please like, comment, and subscribe. This will help me get into the algorithm. Thank you.